Hello, Nebraskans. My name is Marion Miner, and I'm Associate Director of Pro-Life and Family Policy here at the Nebraska Catholic Conference. Thank you for joining us for our presentation today, in which we are going to walk through two competing ballot initiatives related to abortion that are circulating around the state of Nebraska. One of them, the Dangerous, Deceptive, and Demeaning Pro-Abortion initiative brought by a group called Protect Our Rights, and the other, an alternative pro-life petition that's being advanced as a defense against this pro-abortion initiative and brought by the group Protect Women and Children. Now, as we begin, I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see the slideshow as we work through it. That's right here. And here's the nice homepage for the slideshow from which we begin. And as you can see, this talk is titled Dangerous, Deceptive, and Demeaning, a community presentation on defeating the pro-life ballot initiative. And this is a basic roadmap of where we're going to be going today with this presentation. First, we're going to cover the basics of ballot initiatives. Second, we're going to talk about defeating the pro-abortion initiative. Third, we will talk about understanding this alternative pro-life ballot initiative that's been proposed. And fourth, we'll talk about some action steps for life that we will be asking you specifically to take. Okay, and before we actually get into the basics of ballot initiatives, we're going to do some brief historical context, which I think will help us to understand where we are. So before 1973, most states did not allow abortion or allowed it only in very rare circumstances, including in Nebraska. But in 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down the Roe v. Wade decision, which flattened the abortion laws in all 50 states by declaring there was a right to abortion in the U.S. Constitution. And so in the 50 years after Roe, pro-life people found ways to protect unborn children from abortion as much as possible. That's really been our task in the time between Roe and the overturn of Roe in 2022, which I'm sure you remember. We passed many laws, not only to protect unborn children from abortion, but also many laws that made abortion, if it had to be allowed, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, less dangerous for pregnant women. This included requiring that abortion facilities be licensed by the state and that public health officials do periodic inspections of abortion facilities. We also passed laws requiring that only licensed physicians could perform abortions in Nebraska, among other basic safety requirements. In June of 2022, of course, praise God, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the Roe decision in the Dobbs case. The court stated that Roe had been, quote, egregiously wrong from the start, and that there is not and never had been a right to abortion in the U.S. Constitution. The issue of regulating abortion, both for protection of life and for maternal health and safety, would therefore be returned to the people and their representatives. State legislatures and the people of the states then would once again be in charge of their own laws about whether and how to regulate abortion or not. This turned the conversation and the struggle to protect life and maternal health and the safety of women from the courts to the people and the legislatures. Since the Dobbs decision, abortion has been on the ballot now in 7 states. The pro-life side, I'm sorry to say, has lost all 7 times, including most recently in Michigan in 2022 and Ohio in 2023. So riding that wave of momentum then, the pro-abortion supporters are now pushing into several other states this summer and fall, including Nebraska. So that brings us now to this first point 1 on our roadmap, our first stop, which is the basics of the ballot initiatives in Nebraska. Okay, so a ballot initiative is a specific type of petition that allows registered voters within the state to place a question about state law or a state constitutional amendment on the ballot for registered voters. Nebraska is one of the minority of states, we should mention, where our state constitution can be amended without the involvement of the legislature. So in Nebraska, if you want to get on the ballot, there are two signature thresholds that you have to meet in order to qualify. First, you have to get the signatures of 10% of the registered voters in your state. That's about 125,000 registered voters in Nebraska from whom you need signatures. And second, you have to get the signatures of 5% of the registered voters in 38 of Nebraska's 93 counties. If you meet these requirements, your proposal is placed on the ballot in November for the voters to decide. Now, once a proposal is placed on the ballot, the question then becomes how is it determined whether it passes and becomes part of our state constitution? And this is an important point. Our election officials look at this specific question, right? Ballot proposal, but constitutional amendment proposal 1, for example. They look on the specific question being voted on by the people, and they look at how many people who voted specifically on this question voted yes in support of the proposed change to our Constitution. Not whether a majority of Nebraskans voted yes, not whether a majority of Nebraskans who voted in the whole election voted yes. It's whether a majority of those who voted on this question voted yes. That means it does not help us very much if a great number of Nebraskans, especially those who would tend to be with us on this issue, look at this question on the ballot, decide they don't know what it means, and then decide not to vote. Non-participation doesn't count against the passage of the pro-abortion initiative. We need people to show up and vote no, to vote against this pro-abortion proposal. So, and this next screen gives you a couple of images. One is what the initiative petition looks like. That's what's on your left. So if you're approached by somebody asking for signatures, this is what they will ask you to sign. And then on the right, you see what it will look like if it qualifies for the ballot and in fact appears on the ballot in November. So you'll see there could even be more than one initiative that qualifies for the ballot, even on the same subject, and you will vote either for or against each proposal individually. And again, it only takes a majority of those voting on that proposal to make it part of our state constitution. Okay, it's slightly more complicated than that, but that's the basic takeaway. As long as enough people vote on this issue, it's only a bare majority of those voting on this issue voting yes for it to pass. So we need people to show up and vote against the pro-abortion initiative. But now let's talk about that pro-abortion initiative and what it says and does. We'll show you to use the resources, how to use the resources we have developed at the Catholic Conference so you can understand the pro-abortion initiative, why it is dangerous, deceptive, and demeaning, and so that you can explain it to others as well. The document called Where Does It Say That on the Pro-Abortion Initiative is what we are going to go through now. And I would encourage you, by the way, if you're watching, to follow along on our website too. And that's where you'll find these resources in electronic form. So that's at necatholic.org. We'll be using abbreviated versions on the slideshow as we go through this. But the full version of what we're going to walk through is available on the website, necatholic.org. And you can print, I encourage you, go to our website, find these resources, print them off, and distribute them. This is something that there's no restriction on distributing them. There's no restriction on who you send it to. Just get them out to people so that they can get educated on this issue. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you might do that at the end in the action portion of the presentation. So, but before we get into the first resource, we talked a little bit about pro-life losses in 7 states. So pro-abortion forces have sensed, of course, they've been they have a great amount of momentum, and they're very well aware of that. So they are moving now to places like Nebraska, South Dakota, Missouri, and other states who have a ballot initiative process that allows them to go directly to the people and skip the legislature. So that is why they're here. They're here because we have that provision. The Constitution can be amended in Nebraska in that way. and also because they're now more ambitious after their most recent big win in Ohio last year. Okay, so this pro-abortion initiative, launched by a group called Protect Our Rights, was launched in November 2023, and it's sponsored by sort of the usual list of suspects: Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, Women's Fund, Nebraska Appleseed, all groups that lobby in favor of removing restriction and regulation on abortion and against any new laws that would protect preborn human life. Planned Parenthood, of course, is the largest abortion provider in the United States. They are not only a supporter, but a strong backer, including financial backer of this initiative. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually work through this first resource. Where does it say that in the pro-abortion ballot proposal? And what you're seeing on the screen is just the right-hand column in this proposal, which is the language of the ballot initiative itself. What you don't see on the screen is the analysis, but we'll be going through that verbally. And of course, if you want to see it, go to our website at necatholic.org. You can find it there and read to your heart's content. But let's read the language of the initiative itself to begin. And it says, all persons shall have a fundamental right to abortion until fetal viability, or when needed to protect the life or health of the pregnant patient, without interference from the state or its political subdivisions. Fetal viability means the point in pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the patient's treating healthcare practitioner, there is a significant likelihood of the fetus's sustained survival outside the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. Okay, so what does this language mean? The first thing to look at is the phrase all persons, which is highlighted in blue. I can stop referring to my sheet because you can see it right on the screen in front of you. All persons. Not all women, notice, is the language used, but all persons. This is done intentionally to say that not only adult women, but also minor girls have a fundamental right to abortion without interference from the state. In Nebraska, our law requires that if a minor girl seeks an abortion, her parents must have knowledge of this, and at least one of them must consent in most circumstances. This language removes the requirement that parents must know or consent to an abortion being performed on their minor daughter. The second phrase that's highlighted, which you can see in orange, is a fundamental right to abortion until fetal viability. And first, a word about fundamental rights. A fundamental right is one like freedom of speech or free exercise of religion. So this language actually elevates abortion to the same level in our state constitution as something like freedom of speech or freedom of religion, and all the freedom from restriction that those fundamental rights have. Second, what is fetal viability and who decides whether a particular baby is viable? We have our own ideas what this means, but further below in the language, the ballot initiative language actually defines those terms and how they must be interpreted in this ballot initiative. The average person thinks of viability being something like 23 to 24 weeks, but let's go down, let's look at the language itself and see what its own definition of fetal viability is. That's the second paragraph. Fetal viability means the point in pregnancy when there is a significant likelihood of the fetus's sustained survival outside the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. So, how late in pregnancy does a baby have to be born where to have a shot at survival, it would not need things like the help of advanced medical machinery to help eat, to help them breathe, to make sure that they don't, to make sure that they're warm, to make sure that there's medical staff on hand at every hour to respond to something that might go wrong. Very, very late into pregnancy. Just with respect to helping children breathe, right? Being hooked up to a machine that helps them breathe because their lungs aren't developed. Babies born as late as 36 weeks and later are going to need at least some time in a NICU setting with that kind of extraordinary medical care just to give them a shot at survival. So what this language does, right, is defines fetal viability in such a way that it is that though such a baby, right, born say at 36 weeks, is not viable, and that there will be a right to abort that baby in our state constitution. Okay, so this language in orange appears to set some type of limit on this right to exercise this new abortion right. But in fact, we see that that's no real limit at all. And then who decides whether a particular baby, is far along enough to be viable? The language highlighted in yellow, which you can see on your screen, reveals that it is the patient's treating healthcare practitioner. Now, remember that the context is abortion. And when a woman seeks an abortion, she's not speaking with her OBGYN or her family practitioner. She's speaking with an abortion practitioner. This language leaves all the power of deciding the baby's viability to the abortion practitioner, who profits from performing abortions. Next, let's go to the language in green, which is the word health. The language says that all persons shall have a fundamental right to abortion, not only until viability, but also when needed to protect the life or health of the pregnant patient. So what is health? According to U.S. Supreme Court case law, health means not only physical health, but also mental, emotional, or even so-called familial health, which takes such things into account as how many children you already have, what's the state of your family finances, etc. This opens an unlimited loophole to abort for any reason at any stage of gestation into our Constitution. And finally, the phrase in purple, which is without interference from the state or its political subdivisions. This endangers all the health and safety regulations Nebraska's passed over the last 50 years to make abortion less dangerous for women. You don't have to take our word for that either. After passing a similar constitutional amendment in 2022, which we mentioned, Michigan repealed many of its own informed consent laws and its laws requiring that its abortion facilities be licensed by the state and undergo periodic inspection by public health officials, leaving them essentially unregulated. This is not good for anybody. This is an effort that I think if Nebraskans know the content of, they will vote against, they will reject it, but they have to know. They have to know. And we're relying on you to help them to understand what is at stake and what the content of this radical proposal is. We'll talk about more at the end. Another document we've produced explaining the pro-abortion ballot initiative makes many of the same points we have just gone through in other words. And here on the slideshow, I'm going to skip through these slides, which we have talked through already. This explains each of those colored highlighted words and phrases. And this document explaining the pro-abortion ballot initiative is what we'll do now. And we'll do that fairly quickly. The header of this document explains what is at stake. America's largest abortion provider is leading and financing this effort to create a right to late pregnancy abortion in the Nebraska Constitution. The creation of this late-term pregnancy right, as we just spoke about, would make it nearly impossible for our state to limit abortions for any reason at any time in pregnancy, no matter how close to full term. So this initiative is dangerous, deceptive, and demeaning, both in its disregard for human life and for the health and well-being of pregnant women. It's dangerous because 50 years of common sense protections for women and girls against unsafe abortion practices would be in danger of disappearing, as we learned from Michigan's experience. The risk of undoing these protections that make abortion less dangerous is unconscionable. The risks of severe infection, hemorrhage, and death or permanent injury due to botched abortions are much higher where abortion facilities are unmonitored for safety. This is also a lesson we have learned from other experience. Many of you will be familiar with the name Leroy Carhart, who performed abortions in Bellevue for decades before dying a short time ago. He operated clinics in other states too, including Maryland, which has very lax abortion laws. And all you need to do is search the term Leroy Carhart, along with things like injuries and deaths, to come across some quite disturbing material about the permanent injuries he inflicted on many women at his late-term clinic in Maryland. And he even to the extent of not only permanent injury, but in two cases, death. Two women that we know of were killed by Leroy Carhart accidentally as he performed third trimester abortion procedures on them in other states. This initiative would force Nebraska to allow late-term pregnancy abortion and at the same time strike down regulations that would make it less dangerous. Again, this is in no one's best interest. And if people understood this, I think they would reject it in Nebraska. But you have to help them to come to understand. In addition, the language of this initiative, as we spoke about, would undo Nebraska's laws against a minor girl having an abortion without a parent's consent or knowledge. The pro-abortion proposal is also deceptive. It uses purposefully vague language to make it look like there will be new limits, some limits on this new right to abortion. But as we have shown, these are no real limits at all. Even babies who, if they were born, would require basic NICU care for a few days could be classified as not viable by an abortion practitioner. If this initiative passes, there would be a right to abort them in our state constitution. Pro-abortion proposal is also demeaning. It treats unborn children, even children very late in the third trimester, as non-persons with no rights and no protections. It legally isolates minor girls from their parents. And the abortion industry, which is leading this initiative, makes women and girls feel afraid, isolated, and without options in a time when family, friends, churches, and other Nebraskans want to support them and help them navigate their life obstacles during pregnancy and after bringing their child into the world. And Nebraska has some of the best resources in the country for pregnant and parenting moms who need help. This proposal will create instead a culture that incentivizes and expects abortion rather than building a culture of life that seeks to fully support pregnant and parenting women, including those in school and the workplace. So as you can see, this proposal is dangerous, deceptive, and demeaning. It makes women more vulnerable, not less. It's much more extreme than first meets the eye. It creates an almost unlimited right to abortion throughout pregnancy in our state constitution, unregulated for health and safety. It is critical that this effort is defeated in November. And to that end, I would ask you if you have got the petition with you, or if you can pull it up on your screen. If you want the quickest way to get a hold of us, scan this QR code, and then I'll get you signed up for getting on our team for helping to defeat this as in the months leading up to November. I would very much encourage you to do that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is move on to explaining the alternative pro-life ballot initiative. That's this one. This one is also available on our website at necatholic.org. So what are we to think about this alternative initiative, and can Catholics support it? So as we begin, again, you have this with you, that's great. Otherwise, just follow along on the slideshow. The Alternative Pro-Life Initiative was brought forward by Nebraska medical professionals as a defense against the pro-abortion initiative launched months before. This is a new strategy to fight pro-abortion initiatives that has not yet been tried in other states. So let's look at the language and then dive into what it would mean in practical terms, okay? The language says, except when a woman seeks an abortion necessitated by a medical emergency, or when the pregnancy results from sexual assault or incest, unborn children shall be protected from abortion in the second and third trimester. So the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge the initiative's limitations. It does not protect all unborn children, and it is therefore not an acceptable final resolution to the issue of abortion. It is an imperfect proposal. We will get more into that later, but before we do that, let's move on to the proposal's strengths. These are its strengths. First, preborn babies would be constitutionally protected in the second and third trimesters. Second, if this alternative proposal were to pass, the people of Nebraska and their representatives in the legislature would not be prevented from providing additional protections, including in the first trimester and in all other cases. It preserves our ability to build on the protections that would be present in our Constitution. It has not changed the status quo for the legislature, which allows it to pass additional protections, including in the first trimester. So that's very important to understand. It establishes a basic protection in our state constitution starting in the second trimester, but that is something that our legislature can continue to go beyond to provide more protections. So even if this were to pass, our heartbeat bill could be reintroduced the next year, or another proposal in our state legislature to protect babies from conception. That's still all on the table. That's still achievable were this to pass. Third, this alternative proposal maintains current protections for preborn babies and pregnant women in Nebraska law. So our law that doesn't allow abortion after 12 weeks, for example, would still remain in effect if this proposal were to pass. All our laws providing restraints on the abortion industry and protection for the health and safety of pregnant women would also be preserved. So all of this boils down to one basic statement. This alternative initiative would provide some protections for preborn babies in our state. It would preserve all our current protections in state law, and it would allow for additional protections to be passed in the future. It builds a wall of protection, as we said, from our Constitution, in our law, but it will allow for us to continue to advance outside that wall with additional action to protect life. It establishes a minimum protection in our Constitution, which we can go beyond if the legislature chooses. And this is why it makes sense to view this initiative as an incremental pro-life initiative. It takes a small step to protect unborn life without restraining us from doing more. Now, Pope St. John Paul II, who is the great champion of life in the 20th century, I think you would agree, said in his work Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, that it is permissible to support and vote for a law, even an imperfect one, that would incrementally advance protections for innocent life, especially as a defense in order to limit an evil law that already exists and the damage that it could do, or is also ready to be voted on, which is the situation we are in now. So, all of this considered, the bishops of Nebraska sought out the analysis of several pro-life lawyers and Catholic moral theologians. After considering their advice, they arrived at this conclusion. A Catholic can support this alternative pro-life initiative, including signing it, volunteering for it, and voting for it, as a defense against the pro-abortion initiative if they understand and accept the following. And these are what you see on your screen here. This alternative pro-life initiative does not create a right to abortion at any time in pregnancy. That's good. All abortion must be opposed, and direct abortion is never morally acceptable. That remains unchanged and unchangeable. And finally, this must be understood as an incremental step toward protection for all innocent human life, not a permanent solution or final compromise. I think that's clear. A Catholic who understands and accepts those three conditions may support this initiative. So I'd encourage you, please be informed about the pro-abortion initiative, which must be defeated, and this incremental pro-life initiative, which in Christian freedom you may support. And please contact us at the Nebraska Catholic Conference with any questions. And so finally, now we're moving on to the fourth stop in our journey here through this presentation, which is what can you do to help defeat the pro-abortion initiative? And the first thing we are asking you to do is to pray. Make this effort a part of your daily, individual, and family prayer life. Please. If you can, make it a part of your community prayer life as well. Liturgically at the Mass, if you can, but also through prayer groups or Bible studies that you are in. Prayer and efficacy and sacrifice for morally good means are efficacious. We would be foolish not to take advantage of them and ask God for his help, which we are going to need to get this defeated. Nebraska can become the first state to turn back the pro-abortion tide after the Dobbs decision, but it's going to take a lot of prayer and sacrifice to get there. So please take advantage of this and make it part of your daily prayer life. The other thing we're asking you to do is to join the efforts of our 5 for Life Club, which is very simple. Each week, at the beginning of the week, look at your contacts list. You have a phone or you have an address book with a list of your contacts in it. Choose 5 people you will contact that week to make aware of the dangers of the pro-abortion proposal, to start them on the path toward understanding what we are facing. And that can be as simple as this. You can call them if you want, certainly, but it can be as simple as a text message or an email that says, have you heard about this? I found this to be helpful. And then a link to these resources on our website at necatholic.org so that this person that you're contacting can read the language for him or herself and come to their own judgment with the help of the analysis that we do. I think that's a very effective tool. And start with people who you think are inclined to agree with you in the first place. Most people are not aware of what this is or what it contains, this pro-abortion proposal, or even that it's being circulated. So start with the easy pickings and go after your pro-life friends to make sure they're initiated. That's quite a few easy pickups in the early weeks of the 5 for Life Club efforts that you will make, God willing. And from there, proceed to others who are sort of on the fence and keep going until we get to November or until you run out of contacts. But that can be as simple and non-confrontational and non-invasive as a text message or an email with a link to our resources. Okay, this is just a list you're seeing now about different suggestions about how to engage, but this slide also contains a map of the missionary journeys of St. Paul. And this is meant to call to mind, to help you to envision that when we get to November and election night is over and the results are in, will you have a map like Paul's, right, that shows extraordinary effort in order to tell people the truth? Or will you be disappointed in your lack of action? And this is not to make you feel guilty, but hopefully to inspire you. What is your missionary journey map going to look like? We hope it's interesting. We hope that you go to many places. But think of St. Paul as an inspiration for you as you plan out your missionary journey. And start small, start close to home, and put out into the deep as you progress. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to grow personally and for you to do something really tangible on behalf of the least of these in Nebraska. And the last thing that we would have you recall as you set out on this missionary journey is, as we look at this slide, which depicts the descent of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, is that you have baptism, you have confirmation, you have the gift of the sacraments, you have everything you need to go out and get comfortable, being uncomfortable, sharing the truth, the gospel and the gospel of life with your neighbors and with those you know. You have what you need, so take courage. Don't be afraid. One more concluding slide is on the post-abortion healing ministry in Nebraska, which is under the umbrella of the name Hearts Restored. And this is something that is very important to us at the Catholic Conference. It is something that we try to bring up almost every time we talk about abortion in our presentations, because there are so many women and men in Nebraska and across the country who need to see the face of mercy after having been wounded by abortion. There's a phone number there, of course, that you can call or that you can give to someone else. There's a website here, heartsrestorednebraska.com, that you can explore for more information. And you can certainly call our office too at the Nebraska Catholic Conference if you need materials to put in your church so that they're available for those who pass by, or if you have any other questions about this ministry. Okay. So in addition to joining our 5 for Life Club, praying, right, making this a daily part of your prayer life, and then joining the efforts of our 5 for Life Club, we'd also just like to know how you'd like to get involved. When we go out and give community presentations in person, we ask people to sign out, to fill out this note card. But for those of you who are watching online for the first time, what I would encourage you to do is to get a hold of us at the Catholic Conference. Send a note to us through our website at necatholic.org, and just give us your name and some basic information if you'd like to help. We're going to need everybody between now and the election. So that concludes our presentation. I hope that you have found it helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, call us at our office or email us. Go to our website again at necatholic.org in order to get a hold of us. Please pray, please sacrifice, please join the efforts of the 5 for Life Club, and let's beat this thing in November. God bless you.